The night is quiet, so quiet that you can hear your own breathing. You turn off the light, close your eyes, and tell yourself the same thing you've whispered so many nights before. Asterisk, I'm finally going to let them go. Asterisk, for a few peaceful seconds, everything feels still. Then, without warning, their face appears. Not because you wanted it to, not because you searched for it. It simply arrives as naturally as the moon rising into the night sky. A smile, a voice, a memory you thought had faded years ago. Perhaps it was someone you loved deeply. Perhaps it was someone who walked away without explanation. Or maybe it was someone who hurt you in ways you've never fully spoken about. You have tried everything. You've stayed busy. You met new people. You changed jobs, moved to a different city, deleted old photographs, blocked phone numbers, promised yourself that tomorrow would finally be different. And yet, during the quietest moments, they return, sometimes while you're driving home, sometimes while making your morning coffee, sometimes in the middle of a conversation with someone else, sometimes in a dream so vivid that, for a few precious seconds after waking, it feels as though they never left. It can almost feel as if your own mind has betrayed you. Why this person? Why now? Why after all this time? Most people believe they already know the answer. They say, you still love them, or you simply need more time. Others tell you to distract yourself. Stay busy. Think positive. Find someone new. But what if every one of those answers only touches the surface? What if the real reason has very little to do with love, and far more to do with something much deeper? For thousands of years, Zen masters quietly observed something that modern life often encourages us to ignore. The mind rarely clings to people. It clings to unfinished stories. It clings to meanings, to fears, to identities, to questions that were never answered. Sometimes, the person living inside your mind is no longer the real person at all. They have become something else. A symbol, a mirror, a teacher wearing the face of someone from your past. The strange thing is, the harder you try to force them out, the more firmly they seem to remain. It's like standing in a peaceful lake and trying to push the water away with your hands. Every movement creates more ripples. Every struggle disturbs what was already beginning to settle. Perhaps you've noticed this yourself. The days you desperately try not to think about them are often the very days they appear most often. Why? Because the mind has a curious habit. Whatever we fight, we quietly feed. Whatever we fear, we secretly strengthen. And whatever we refuse to understand continues knocking at the door of our awareness. Imagine your mind as a quiet house. Most thoughts arrive like gentle visitors. They knock. They stay for a moment. Then they leave. But every once in a while, one visitor refuses to go. Not because they are stronger than every other guest, but because somewhere inside that house, there's still a room with the light on. A room waiting to be entered. A room that has never truly been explored. Tonight, we are not here to force anyone out of that house. Zen has never been about fighting the mind. It has never taught us to suppress emotions or erase memories. Instead, it invites us to do something far more courageous. To open the door, to sit quietly beside the visitor, and to ask a single question. Why are you still here? The answer may surprise you, because sometimes the person who keeps returning to your thoughts isn't asking for another chance. They aren't asking to come back into your life. They are asking you to discover something within yourself that you have overlooked for years. That is why some memories survive time. Not because they are stronger than time, but because their lesson has not yet been fully understood. This is where Zen begins to see life differently. It does not ask, how do I forget this person? It asks, what does this experience try to awaken inside me? Those are two completely different questions. One seeks escape, the other seeks freedom. And there is a profound difference between escaping pain and becoming free from it. As we continue this journey together, you may discover that the person you've spent so much energy trying to forget was never the real mystery. The real mystery has always been the silent part of yourself that awakens whenever they appear. Before we explore the first hidden truth, I'd like to share a simple story. A young traveler once climbed a mountain to visit an old Zen master. When he finally arrived, exhausted from the long journey, he bowed respectfully and asked, "Master, why can't I stop thinking about someone who left my life years ago?" The old master looked at him with gentle eyes, but instead of answering, he quietly picked up a small lantern. Without saying a single word, he carried it into a dark room. The traveler followed. The room was almost completely empty, just silence and darkness. The master placed the lantern on the floor. Its soft light filled every corner of the room. Then he smiled. "There is always enough space here," he said softly. "The darkness only made you believe there wasn't." The traveler didn't understand. Not yet, but before the night was over, his question had completely disappeared. Not because someone answered it for him, but because he finally saw what had been there all along. Perhaps, before this video ends, you'll see it too. For centuries, people have searched for ways to silence the mind. They've traveled across continents, sat in temples, climbed mountains, read countless books, all with the hope of finding one simple answer. How do I stop thinking about someone? Yet Zen offers a surprising response. It says, perhaps that isn't the right question. Imagine standing beside a river. Leaves drift gently across the surface. Some pass by unnoticed. Others catch your attention for a moment before floating away. Now, imagine reaching into the water, desperately trying to hold back one single leaf. The harder you grab, the more the water slips through your fingers. Soon the entire river is disturbed, not because of the leaf, but because of your resistance. Our thoughts behave in much the same way. Most appear and disappear, but every now and then, one thought becomes a permanent guest, not because it is more powerful than every other thought, but because somewhere inside us, we have given it permission to stay. This is the first great lesson of Zen. Your suffering is rarely created by the thought itself. It is created by your relationship with the thought. Think about that for a moment. Two people can lose someone they deeply loved. One carries the memory with warmth. The other carries it with unbearable pain. The memory may be almost identical, but the relationship to that memory is completely different. That changes everything. Perhaps you've experienced this without realizing it. There may have been days when thoughts of this person appeared only briefly. They came and quietly disappeared. Then there were other days when a single memory followed you everywhere. You replayed old conversations. Imagined different endings. Wonder what you should have said. What they should have said. What might have happened if only one small moment had unfolded differently. Hours passed, yet your body never left the present. Only your mind did. Zen gently reminds us that the mind is an extraordinary storyteller. It doesn't simply remember the past. It rewrites it again and again and again. Every time we revisit an old memory, we unknowingly add new emotions to it. A little more regret, a little more longing, a little more guilt, until one day, we're no longer remembering what truly happened. We're remembering the story we've told ourselves hundreds of times. That story begins to feel like reality. But Zen asks us to pause, to breathe, and to ask a question that few people ever ask. What if the story isn't the truth? Not because your memories are false, but because every memory passes through the filter of today's emotions. The lonely mind remembers differently than the peaceful mind. The fearful heart tells a different story than the grateful one. This is why the same memory can feel completely different years later. The memory didn't change. You did. And if you can change once, you can change again. That realization opens the first small door toward freedom. Freedom does not begin when the memory disappears. Freedom begins the moment you realize you are no longer trapped inside the story your mind keeps repeating. The old Zen masters often compare the mind to an empty room. Thoughts enter, thoughts leave, but the room itself remains unchanged. Now ask yourself something. When this person's face appears in your mind, what enters first? Is it truly their face? Or is it the feeling attached to it? The sadness, the hope, the regret, the unanswered question. Zen suggests that what we call missing someone is often something much deeper. Sometimes, we are not missing the person at all. We are missing the version of ourselves that existed when they were still part of our lives. That version of you may have felt safer, more hopeful, more loved, or perhaps simply more certain about the future. Without realizing it, your mind keeps returning to them because it believes they're the doorway back to that old version of yourself. But are they? Or has the doorway always been within you? That question changes everything, because if peace depends on another person, it will always remain fragile. But if peace can be rediscovered within your own awareness, then no one has the power to take it away. This brings us to the first hidden truth. And once you truly understand it, you may never look at your thoughts the same way again. The first hidden truth is this. What keeps someone alive in your mind is rarely love. More often, it is attachment. At first, those two words sound almost identical. Many people spend years believing they are the same thing. But Zen has always made a quiet distinction between them. Love opens the heart. Attachment tightens its grip. Love allows another person to be exactly who they are. Attachment quietly whispers, "I need you to make me feel whole." Love brings peace, even when life changes. Attachment creates fear. Fear of losing. Fear of being forgotten. Fear that without this one person, something essential inside you will disappear forever. This is why attachment is so exhausting. It is not simply thinking about someone. It is believing that your happiness is tied to their presence. Imagine holding a beautiful bird in your hands. Love opens your palms and lets it fly. Attachment closes your fingers tighter and tighter, terrified it might leave. Ironically, the tighter you squeeze, the more likely you are to lose what you hope to keep. The same is true within the mind. Many people say, "I can't stop thinking about them because I love them so much." Zen gently asks, or are you holding on because you fear who you might become without them? That question is uncomfortable, but discomfort is often where wisdom quietly begins. Think back for a moment. When thoughts of this person appear, what follows? Do you immediately smile with gratitude? Or does your chest tighten? Do you begin imagining conversations that will never happen? Do you replay arguments? Search for hidden meanings? Wonder whether they ever think about you? Perhaps you even find yourself checking an old message, looking at a photograph, visiting a social media page you promised yourself you would never visit again. If so, pause before judging yourself. This is not weakness. It is simply the mind doing what the mind has always done, searching for certainty where none exists. The Buddha observed something remarkable thousands of years ago. The human mind naturally reaches for what feels pleasant, pushes away what feels painful, and clings to anything that seems capable of protecting the self. That clinging becomes attachment, and attachment quietly transforms passing thoughts into permanent residence. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack every single day. At first, you barely notice the weight. Over time, your shoulders ache. Your back becomes stiff. Walking feels harder. Eventually, you forget what it feels like to walk freely. Then one day, someone asks, "Why don't you put the backpack down?" You look at them with confusion. Because after carrying it for so long, it no longer feels like something you're carrying. It feels like part of who you are. Attachment works the same way. We carry memories for so long that we mistake them for our identity. We begin saying things like, I'll always be the person they left. I'll always be the one who wasn't enough. I'll never love like that again. Notice something. Those aren't memories anymore. They're identities. And identities are much harder to release than memories. This is why forcing yourself to forget rarely works. You cannot argue your way out of an identity. You must first see it clearly. A Zen teacher once said, when you call the cage your home, freedom begins to feel frightening. Perhaps that is why letting go feels so difficult. Not because you cannot survive without that person, but because you've quietly built part of your identity around their absence. Without realizing it, your mind keeps returning to them, hoping to recover a version of yourself that no longer exists. Yet life never asks us to become who we were yesterday. Life quietly invites us to discover who we can become today. This is the great misunderstanding. You believe you are chasing another person. In truth, you're searching for yourself. The person who left was only the doorway. The real journey has always been inward. Take one slow breath. There is nothing you need to fix right now. Nothing you need to force. Simply notice. As this person's image enters your mind, observe what immediately follows. A feeling, a fear, a hope, a story. Don't push any of it away. Don't hold on to it either. Just watch it with the quiet curiosity of someone sitting beside a river. The water keeps moving. The leaves keep drifting. And for the first time, you may begin to notice something extraordinary. The river was never asking the leaves to stay. Only the hand reaching into the water was. That single realization has changed countless lives. Yet attachment is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more subtle, something that keeps people connected long after the relationship itself has ended. Zen calls it unfinished understanding. And once you see it, you may finally understand why some people seem impossible to forget. Have you ever noticed something strange? There are people who disappear from our lives, and within a few weeks, we barely think about them anymore. The names slowly fade. Their voices become distant. Even their faces grow difficult to remember. Then there are others who seem to leave footprints in places far deeper than memory. Years can pass. Entire chapters of your life can change. You become older, wiser, perhaps even happier. And yet, without warning, they return, not in front of you, but within you. One quiet afternoon, their laughter echoes through your mind. One familiar song, and suddenly you're standing in a moment that no longer exists. One scent carried by the wind, and your heart remembers before your mind does. Why? Zen suggests that not every relationship ends when two people walk in different directions. Some relationships continue because something within us remains unfinished. Notice that word carefully. Unfinished. Not unfinished love. Not unfinished destiny. Unfinished understanding. There's an old saying among Zen practitioners. A lesson ignored will return wearing a different face. At first, those words may sound mysterious. But think about your own life. Have you ever found yourself meeting different people who somehow awaken the same emotions? Different names, different personalities, yet the same fear, the same disappointment, the same longing, almost as if life keeps handing you different books that all contain the same chapter. This is not punishment. Zen has never viewed life as a system of rewards and punishments. Instead, it sees life as a patient teacher, one that repeats the lesson, not because you failed, but because your understanding is still unfolding. Perhaps the person who won't leave your mind was never meant to stay forever. Perhaps they came to reveal something that had been quietly living inside you long before you ever met them. Maybe they awakened your fear of abandonment. Maybe they exposed your need for approval. Maybe they reflected a loneliness you had spent years trying not to notice. Or perhaps, for the first time in your life, they made you feel truly seen. When they left, it wasn't only the relationship that disappeared. It felt as though that version of yourself disappeared too. That is why the memory remains alive. Not because the past is calling you back, but because part of your heart is still trying to understand what happened. Most people respond by asking, why did they leave? Zen gently changes the question. What did their presence reveal? Those two questions lead to completely different lives. The first keeps your attention fixed on another person. The second quietly brings you home to yourself. Imagine a teacher handing a student the same lesson year after year. The questions look different. The paper changes. Even the classroom changes. But the lesson remains exactly the same. Not because the teacher enjoys repeating it, because the student has not yet seen what the lesson was truly about. Life often teaches us in much the same way, until we understand ourselves. The faces may change, but the patterns remain. Perhaps this is why some people stay in our thoughts, not to haunt us, not to punish us, but to gently remind us that there is still a door within us waiting to be opened, a door that no one else can walk through for us. Take another slow breath. Think of the person who has been quietly living in your mind. Now ask yourself, if they suddenly returned tomorrow, would every feeling disappear? Or would the same fears, the same doubts, the same questions slowly return again? If the answer is yes, then perhaps the real wound was never created by their absence. Perhaps it was simply revealed by it. That realization can feel uncomfortable. Yet within Zen, discomfort is often the beginning of awakening. Because once you stop asking life to give you different people, you begin asking it to show you a different way of seeing. And that changes everything. Yet even unfinished lessons are not the deepest reason someone remains in your mind. There is something even more subtle. Something so hidden that most people spend their entire lives without ever noticing it. Zen calls it the mirror. Imagine standing before a perfectly still lake at sunrise. The water is so calm that it reflects everything with astonishing clarity. The mountains, the sky, the clouds, your own face. Now imagine throwing a single stone into that lake. Suddenly, the reflection begins to tremble. The mountains haven't moved. The sky hasn't changed. Only the surface has become disturbed. Zen teaches that the people who affect us most deeply are often like that lake. They do not create everything we feel. They reveal what is already there. This may be one of the most difficult truths to accept, because it is far easier to believe, they made me feel this way, than to ask, what inside me was awakened when they appeared? Think about the people who rarely stay in your mind. You may have worked with hundreds of people, met thousands throughout your life. Most passed through your story like leaves carried by the wind. You barely remember their names. Yet one person, one conversation, one goodbye, still echoes years later. Why them? Was it really because they were extraordinary? Perhaps. But Zen quietly asks another question. What part of you became visible because of them? Maybe they reflected the confidence you wished you possessed. Maybe they lived with a freedom you secretly longed for. Maybe their kindness reminded you how deeply you wanted to be understood. Or perhaps their rejection touched an old wound that had been quietly waiting since childhood. A wound you didn't even know was still there. The person became unforgettable, not because they created the wound, but because they revealed it. Imagine walking through an old house with a flashlight. The light doesn't create the dust. It simply makes the dust visible. In the same way, certain people shine a light into forgotten corners of our hearts. corners we would never have discovered on our own. This is why Zen rarely encourages us to blame another person for everything we feel, nor does it ask us to blame ourselves. Instead, it invites us to become curious. Curiosity is one of the quietest forms of wisdom. Ask yourself, when you think about this person, what emotion appears first? Not the story, not the memory, the emotion. Is it sadness, fear, regret, jealousy, longing, relief? Whatever appears, stay with it for just a moment. Don't explain it. Don't judge it. Simply notice it, because emotions are often messengers. They arrive carrying information. But most of us become so distracted by the person that we never listen to the message. Imagine receiving a letter. Instead of opening it, you spend years staring at the envelope. That is what many of us unknowingly do. We become fascinated by the messenger, while ignoring the message. Zen gently turns the envelope over. It asks us to finally read what has been waiting inside all along. Perhaps this person awakened your fear of never being enough. Perhaps they revealed how often you seek validation from others. Perhaps they exposed how tightly you've connected your worth to being chosen. If so, the invitation is not to become someone else. The invitation is to see yourself with greater honesty and greater compassion, because awareness is the beginning of transformation. Nothing changes while it remains hidden, but the moment something is seen clearly, it begins to lose its power over us. There is a beautiful story told in many Zen communities. A young monk spent years trying to polish an old mirror. Every morning, he wiped it carefully. Every evening, he wiped it again. Still, he complained that the mirror reflected nothing clearly. An elderly master walked by and smiled. He asked, "What are you polishing?" "The mirror," the young monk replied. The master shook his head gently. "The mirror is already clear. It is your eyes that are clouded." For a long moment, the young monk said nothing, because he realized he had spent years trying to fix the wrong thing. How often do we do the same? We try to change another person. We try to rewrite the past. We try to erase memories. All the while, the only thing asking to change is the way we see. When that changes, everything else begins to change with it. And yet, there's another illusion that quietly keeps these thoughts alive. An illusion so common that almost everyone mistakes it for reality. It is the belief that if only life had unfolded differently, peace would finally be ours. But Zen has something unexpected to say about that. There's a question the mind loves to ask. It sounds innocent, almost harmless, but it has kept countless hearts trapped for years. What if? What if I had called one more time? What if I had said the right words? What if I had stayed? What if they had stayed? What if we had met at a different time? What if life had been kinder? At first, these questions feel like hope, but slowly, they become a prison. Zen has a quiet way of exposing this illusion. It reminds us that suffering is rarely created by what happened. It is created by our attachment to what we wish had happened instead. Think about how often your mind rewrites the past. Perhaps you've imagined the conversation ending differently. You picture yourself saying exactly the right thing. They smile. They understand. They stay. Or perhaps you imagine receiving the apology that never came. The explanation you waited years to hear. The closure you believed would finally bring peace. The strange thing is, even if those imaginary moments had happened, would your mind truly stop searching? Or would it simply invent another question, another possibility, another ending? The mind that refuses to accept today will always find another yesterday to revisit. This is why Zen does not teach us to perfect the past. It teaches us to awaken in the present. There's an old story about a traveler crossing a mountain pass. As the sun began to set, he stopped and looked back at the winding road behind him. I wish I had chosen the other path, he whispered. An old monk walking nearby smiled gently. Would that path bring you here? The traveler hesitated. No. Then how can you know it was better? For a long moment, the traveler stared at the mountains. He realized something unexpected. He had spent hours grieving a journey he had never actually lived. How often do we do the same? We compare reality to a life that exists only in imagination. And imagination always cheats. It edits out the difficult moments. It keeps only the beautiful ones. When you remember that relationship, do you remember every ordinary Tuesday, every misunderstanding, every silence, every disagreement? Or does your mind carefully select only the moments that support the story it wants to believe? The human mind is a remarkable editor. It cuts, it rearranges, it highlights, it removes, until eventually the memory becomes less like history and more like a beautifully edited film. Zen invites us to watch that film with gentle awareness, not to destroy it, not to deny it, simply to recognize that it is a film, not the present moment. There is incredible freedom in that realization, because once you stop negotiating with yesterday, today finally has room to breathe. Take another slow breath. Notice the chair beneath you. Notice the sound around you. Notice this very moment, right now, without changing anything, without solving anything, without receiving one more message from that person. You are breathing. Your heart is beating. Life is still unfolding. The present has never abandoned you. Only your attention has. Perhaps that is why peace is felt so far away. Not because it disappeared, but because your mind kept searching for it in a place where it no longer lives. Zen gently places a hand on your shoulder and whispers, "Come back." Not back to the relationship, not back to the memory, back to yourself. Because the only place where healing has ever been possible is here, now. Yet there is another habit of the mind that quietly keeps the past alive. It is even more subtle than attachment, even more persuasive than regret. It is the belief that every thought deserves to be believed. And until we see through that illusion, the mind will continue telling the same story again and again and again. If there is one teaching in Zen that has the power to change your life forever, it is this. You're not your thoughts. Read those words again. You are not your thoughts. At first, they may sound simple, almost too simple, but spend a lifetime misunderstanding them, and your mind becomes a prison. Imagine sitting beside a busy highway. Thousands of cars pass every hour. Some are small, some are loud, some move quickly, others slow down before disappearing into the distance. Now, imagine believing that every single car belongs to you. How exhausting would that be? Yet this is exactly how many of us live with our thoughts. A memory appears. I must still love them. A feeling arises. I'll never get over this. An image flashes through the mind. This means they're supposed to come back. One thought after another, and without even noticing, we believe every one of them. Zen asks us to pause, not to stop thinking, not to force silence, simply to notice. Notice that a thought has appeared. Notice that it stayed for a moment. Notice that it disappeared. Just as every cloud eventually leaves the sky, every thought eventually leaves the mind, unless we invite it to stay. Think about the last time this person's face appeared in your thoughts. What happened next? Perhaps one memory became another, then another. Soon your mind began telling a familiar story. Maybe you imagined seeing them again. Maybe you wondered what they were doing. Maybe you questioned every decision you ever made. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 30. Nothing had happened in the outside world. Yet inside your mind, an entire movie had unfolded. The remarkable thing is this. The suffering did not come from the first thought. The first thought simply knocked on the door. The suffering began when you invited it inside, offered it a chair, and asked it to stay for dinner. The old Zen masters often smiled when people complained that their minds would not become quiet. One student once asked, "Master, how do I stop unwanted thoughts?" The master pointed toward the sky. "Can you stop birds from flying over your head?" "No. But can you stop them from building a nest in your hair?" The student laughed. "Of course." The master nodded. "So why do you keep giving your thoughts a place to build?" There is great freedom hidden inside those few words. You cannot prevent thoughts from appearing. No one can, not even the wisest monk, not even after decades of meditation. Thoughts are simply part of being human. The difference is not who has thoughts. The difference is who believes them. Imagine standing beside a train station. Train after train arrives. Each one announces a different destination. Regret, longing, anger, hope, fear. You do not have to board every train. You can simply stand on the platform, watching them come, watching them go. That is awareness. And awareness changes everything. Because the moment you realize, "I'm watching this thought," something extraordinary happens. There are now two things present, the thought and the awareness observing it. Which one are you? The thought keeps changing. The awareness remains. That quiet awareness has been with you since childhood. It watched your happiest moments. It watched your greatest heartbreaks. It watched every relationship begin and every relationship end. Thoughts have come and gone by the millions. Yet the awareness behind them has never disappeared. Zen calls us home to that awareness, not because it removes pain overnight, but because it reminds us that peace has never depended on controlling the mind. Peace appears the moment we stop confusing ourselves with every passing thought. Take a slow breath. Close your eyes for just a moment if you wish. Notice the next thought that enters your mind. Don't chase it. Don't fight it. Simply whisper to yourself, "There is a thought." Not, "This is who I am." Just, "There is a thought." Feel the difference. A little more space, a little less pressure, a little more freedom. This is where healing quietly begins. Not when every painful memory disappears, but when every memory loses the power to define who you are. Yet even after we learn to observe our thoughts, one final illusion often remains. It is the illusion that our pain will last forever. And until we see through that illusion, we will continue fearing tomorrow instead of fully living today. There is a quiet lie the mind tells us whenever we are hurting. It whispers, "This is how you'll feel forever." Forever is a frightening word, because once we believe it, hope quietly begins to disappear. Perhaps you've felt this before. A heartbreak that seemed impossible to survive. A goodbye that felt like the end of everything. A season of loneliness so heavy you couldn't imagine ever smiling again. Yet here you are, still breathing, still growing, still listening. Life continued moving, even when it felt impossible. Zen invites us to notice something so ordinary that we often overlook its extraordinary truth. Everything changes. Morning becomes afternoon. Summer becomes autumn. A child becomes an adult. The strongest mountains are slowly shaped by wind and rain. The brightest stars eventually fade. Nothing in existence remains exactly as it is. Nothing. Then why do we believe our pain is the one exception? Perhaps because suffering narrows our vision. It convinces us that this moment is permanent, that today's emotions are tomorrow's destiny. But they are not. Look back at your own life. There was once a problem that consumed your every waking thought. Perhaps you lost a job. Perhaps you failed at something important. Perhaps you believed your future had fallen apart. At the time, it felt unbearable. Today, how often do you think about it? Maybe once a month. Maybe once a year. Maybe not at all. What changed? Did the past disappear? No. You changed. Your understanding changed. Your relationship with the memory changed. And because you changed, the pain changed too. This is one of the most hopeful teachings in Zen. Healing is not the result of forcing life to become different. Healing happens because nothing remains the same, not even you. Imagine holding a block of ice in your hands. At first, it feels solid, unmoving, permanent, but stay with it long enough and it begins to melt, not because you fought it, not because you argued with it, simply because change is the nature of all things. Our emotions are much the same. When we stop freezing them with resistance, they begin to soften on their own. The Buddha often pointed toward this truth. Everything that arises passes away. Every joyful moment, every painful moment, every relationship, every season of life, every thought, every feeling, everything. Notice the rhythm of your own breathing. You inhale, you exhale. You cannot keep either one forever. Life itself is teaching impermanence with every breath. Yet somehow, when it comes to emotional pain, we forget this lesson. We assume this feeling is different. It will always be here. But will it? Think about the first time this person entered your life. There was a day before you ever knew their name. A day when they did not exist in your world at all. Then life changed. One meeting, one conversation, one unexpected moment. Everything felt different. If life could change once, what makes you believe it cannot change again? This doesn't mean forgetting them. Zen is not asking you to erase your past. It is asking you to stop chaining your future to it. There is a beautiful image used by many Zen teachers. Imagine standing beside the ocean. Each wave rises. Each wave reaches its highest point. Each wave gently returns to the sea. No wave remains suspended forever. If it did, the ocean would no longer be alive. Your emotions are like those waves. When allowed to move naturally, they complete their journey. When we resist them, we become exhausted trying to hold the tide in place. Take another slow breath. Ask yourself this gentle question. What if I stopped demanding that this feeling disappear and simply allowed it to move at its own pace? Perhaps, for the first time, you would notice that it has already begun. Very quietly, very slowly, it has been changing all along. Even now, you are not the same person who first experienced that heartbreak. You have survived days you once believed would destroy you. You have learned lessons you never asked to learn. You have become stronger in ways your past self could never have imagined. That doesn't mean the journey is over, but it does mean you're already walking it. And now, we arrive at the final truth, the deepest lesson of all, the one that transforms every person, every memory, every heartbreak into something entirely unexpected. What if the person you have spent so many years trying to forget was never sent into your life to break your heart? What if they came to awaken it? For a long time, you may have believed this story was about another person, their choices, their words, their absence, their silence. But what if it was never really about them? What if they were only the beginning? Zen often speaks of teachers. Most people imagine an old monk sitting quietly in a temple, someone who speaks gently, someone who guides with wisdom. But life rarely sends us teachers in the form we expect. Sometimes, our greatest teacher is the person who breaks our heart. Sometimes, it is the friend who betrays us, the parent who never understood us, the relationship that ended far too soon, the stranger who appeared for only a brief season, yet changed the direction of our entire life. At first, we call these experiences unfair, cruel, meaningless. Only years later, if we are willing to look carefully, do we begin to see something else. They changed us, not always in comfortable ways, but in necessary ones. Perhaps before meeting them, you measured your worth by how deeply someone loved you. After losing them, You slowly began learning how to love yourself. Perhaps before they walked away, you feared being alone more than anything else. Now, after years of healing, you have discovered a quiet strength you never knew existed. Perhaps before that heartbreak, your happiness depended entirely on another person. Today, you are beginning to understand that peace is something no one else can give, and no one else can take away. If that is true, then was the relationship only about romance? Or was it also about awakening? Zen asks questions like these because they change the direction of our attention. Instead of asking, "Why did this happen to me?" we begin asking, "What is this experience inviting me to become?" Those are very different lives. One keeps us looking backward. The other gently turns our face toward tomorrow. There is a story told in a quiet mountain monastery. A young monk spent many years searching for enlightenment. He traveled from teacher to teacher, read sacred texts, practiced meditation from sunrise until long after sunset. Still, he felt no closer to peace. One evening, discouraged and exhausted, he sat beneath an old pine tree. As the wind moved gently through its branches, a single pine cone fell to the ground. The sound was almost nothing, just a soft tap against the earth. Yet in that ordinary moment, something inside him became completely still. He later said, "It wasn't the pine cone that awakened me. It simply arrived at the exact moment I was finally ready to see." Perhaps people enter our lives in the same way. Some stay for decades, others for only a few months. But none of them are the awakening itself. They are only the moment that invites it. The awakening always happens within. Think about the person who still lives in your thoughts. Imagine meeting them today, not to restart the relationship, not to ask unanswered questions, not to change the past, simply to thank them, not because everything they did was right. Some wounds should never have happened. Some words should never have been spoken. Some goodbyes were deeply painful. Zen never asks us to pretend suffering is beautiful, but it does ask us to look beyond it. Can you honestly say that you are exactly the same person you were before meeting them? Probably not. Life shaped you. Pain shaped you. Love shaped you. Loss shaped you. Even now, this very moment, those experiences continue shaping the person you are becoming. Perhaps that was always the gift. Not the relationship itself, but the transformation it quietly began. There comes a moment on every spiritual path when we stop asking life to return what it has taken, and instead, we begin thanking life for what it has revealed. That moment cannot be forced. It arrives naturally, like sunrise after a long night. Perhaps today is not that day for you, and that's perfectly all right. Healing has never followed a schedule. Awakening cannot be rushed. The flower does not bloom because someone pulls on its petals. It blooms because the season is right. So be patient with yourself. Be gentle with your own heart. Trust that understanding grows quietly, even on the days when nothing seems to change. One day, perhaps months from now, perhaps years, you will think of this person again. Their face will appear, just as it always has. But something will be different. There will be no tightness in your chest. No desperate need to rewrite the past. No silent argument with reality. Only gratitude. A quiet smile. A peaceful breath. And in that simple moment, you will finally understand. They were never the prison. They were never the destination. They were never the answer you have been searching for. They were simply the door. And the entire time, the journey was leading you back to yourself. Before we part, I'd like to invite you to do something very simple. You don't need years of meditation. You don't need to understand every teaching of Zen. You only need this moment. Take a slow, gentle breath, and if it feels comfortable, allow your eyes to close for just a few seconds. Don't try to empty your mind. Don't try to force peace. Just breathe. Now, Allow the person we've been talking about to appear naturally. Don't search for them. If they come, simply let them come. Notice their face. Notice the emotions that quietly rise within you. Perhaps there is sadness, perhaps gratitude, perhaps anger, perhaps love, perhaps nothing at all. Whatever appears, let it be exactly as it is. There is nothing to fix, nothing to judge, nothing to hide. Simply observe. Now imagine the two of you standing beside a quiet river at sunrise. The water moves gently. The air is still. Neither of you says a word. For a long moment, there is only silence. Then, instead of asking, "Why did you leave?" try asking a different question. "What did you come here to teach me?" Don't force an answer. Let the silence respond. Sometimes, the deepest answers arrive without words. Perhaps you'll realize they taught you courage. Perhaps they taught you self-respect. Perhaps they showed you how deeply you were capable of loving. Or perhaps they revealed the parts of yourself that have been waiting to heal for many years. Whatever the answer may be, receive it gently. Now, look at this person one final time. Not with the eyes of regret, not with the eyes of longing, but with the eyes of understanding. In your heart, quietly say, "Thank you. Thank you for every joyful moment. Thank you for every difficult lesson. Thank you for helping me become the person I am today. And now, I release the story, not because it never mattered, but because I no longer need to carry it." Watch as they slowly turn and continue walking along the river. You do not follow. They do not look back. There is no sadness in this goodbye, only peace, only gratitude, only acceptance. As they disappear into the morning light, notice something surprising. The emptiness you feared isn't empty at all. It is spacious, quiet, alive, for the first time in a very long while. There is room for something new, room for joy, room for hope, room for the person you are still becoming. Take one more deep breath. Feel the air entering your body. Feel the ground supporting you. Feel this moment exactly as it is. This is where your life has always been. Not yesterday, not tomorrow. Here, now. If thoughts of that person return tomorrow, don't be afraid. Smile gently. Welcome them like an old traveler passing through. Listen for the lesson. Thank them for the reminder. Then allow them to continue on their way. You no longer need to chase them. You no longer need to fight them. You no longer need to ask them to stay. Because now you understand. Peace was never waiting inside another person. It has always been quietly waiting inside you. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson Zen has been trying to whisper all along. Not that life will never break your heart, but that your heart is far stronger, far wiser, and far more spacious than you ever imagined. Thank you for sharing this quiet journey with me. If these teachings brought even a small moment of peace into your day, I hope you'll continue walking this path with us. Until we meet again, may your mind become a little quieter, may your heart become a little lighter, and may every person who enters your life, whether they stay for a lifetime or only for a single season, bring you one step closer to your true self. Take care, and may peace walk beside you.